Thank you, everyone. I'd like to personally welcome Nicholas Kirkwood here, right from London, who is a multi-award winning luxury women's shoe designer.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for flying all the way over here.
It's a pleasure. Pleasure to be here.
So we're here today because we want to talk about the current state of the fashion industry and how that will impact humanity in terms of sustainability, parenthesis, whatever that means, which we're going to discuss, and also what you're doing in particular to drive the agenda forwards.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess my sort of journey into the world of sort of sustainability really sort of began sort of about 5 years ago. So actually, I first started my brand back in 2005, and the sort of core focus there was really about innovative materials of their time. So that might have been printed leathers or other sort of special like non-wovens, as well as really sort of focusing on sort of the silhouette and sort of particularly sort of shapes of heels and stuff like that. I'd say the last sort of 5 years, my focus has really sort of been on the impact that materials really have on the planet. Fashion is the second or third largest sort of polluting industry in the world, and that is massively significant. And yet it is drastically sort of lagging behind in the innovation sort of aspects of it, and also sort of brands really sort of taking it sort of very seriously and trying to sort of rethink the entire sort of model.
Where do you think the biggest challenges are currently in the fashion industry, and how does that make you feel, and what is driving you to contribute to the solution?
I think it was just an understanding or really an education into really the impact that my products were having on the planet. So I first sort of found out that there's sort of 24 billion pairs of shoes made every single year, and about 90% of those will end up in landfill, and most likely within a year or two of it being kind of born. Now, just to kind of put that into perspective, 24 billion pairs is every single year would, if you line them up, heel to toe, that would wrap around the world once every single day. Wow. So if you imagine that as a production line, that is going faster than the speed of light. That is literally coming out faster than the speed of light, and that is going into the ground every single day. And so, how does the industry tackle this?
Yeah.
It's it needs to be a multi sort of pronged approach. The education is a huge sort of part of it. Desirability to make a difference, I think, kind of comes from that education, and certainly that was the sort of the journey that I kind of had. And as a designer, I really wanted to first sort of try. I love the challenge that this kind of brought as a sort of designer. So my initial approach was like, okay, just try to find what kind of so-called sustainable materials are out there that I could use.
What does sustainable materials mean? So I see you have a pair of shoes here. When I see brands, they say, we're using a sustainable outer sole. Yeah. So, or a sustainable material for the heel. What are these brands trying to tell the consumer, and what are your thoughts on this?
They are essentially, anybody really using the word sustainable is essentially deceiving you. There is no such brand that is actually sustainable. Like, sustainable is in my books, is it either is sustainable or it's not sustainable. Okay. In the same way, you can't be like a little bit pregnant. It's very much the same type of thing. Sustainability is a subject matter that we can all talk about and we all need to be sort of aware of. But there's less impact, and then there is really regenerative. And sustainability is that tipping point. And I think we all need to be obviously working towards a far more, a less impact, and ultimately towards a kind of regenerative sort of system. So, I mean, within my own sort of story, that sort of very much sort of started off by, sort of, let me look at a recycled heel, pineapple leather and whatever. And then I suddenly sort of felt kind of good about myself until I sort of scratched the surface a little bit more. And I found out that that recycled plastic heel is in fact only 30% recycled, but it classifies as being as a recycled product. That pineapple leather actually in fact is just is actually just a sandwich of pineapple mush between a polyurethane top and a nylon backing. So, really when someone says that something is plant-based, they mean exactly that. It's plant-based. It's not the same as a plant-based diet. You could not give somebody a ham sandwich and say it's plant-based because of the bread or because you've used margarine. And essentially, that is the kind of the same communication that is happening within sort of fashion. So as I sort of delve deeper into that kind of wormhole of trying to find a sort of solution to these, I just kept on being hit by these barriers of kind of misinformation. And so I sort of tried to sort of see how deep it could really kind of go and how far I could really go even within the current setup of manufacturing or of distribution that I was kind of there. And so I guess it sort of split into sort of three kind of journeys so far. The first sort of journey is this idea of sort of realization and realizing that there's a lot of sort of misinformation out there, and so there's that sort of education part. Then it's a sort of stop and try to sort of see how I can use that to pivot. My next sort of journey was saying, okay, instead of making this Frankenstein kind of shoe, which is part recycled, part organic, part upcycled, whatever it may be, that still has no post-consumer hope other than going to sort of landfill. What could be my next pivot on that? That led me to thinking, okay, I can't be making this sort of this mixed this mixed up kind of product. I need to be sort of focusing on a fully natural kind of product, and that's what I sort of came here. But so within this product itself, and I'll sort of explain to you why it's really ultimately not kind of perfect by any sort of means. But I've sort of tried to, using off-the-shelf sort of materials, take it as far as a luxury brand really could. Yeah. So both uppers here are using sort of completely organic materials.
It would be really great if you could also explain the things that the audience don't see as well. And I think that insight is something that is really important as a consumer, because I'm always looking at the material that's on top. Could you continue with what you're saying, but also point out those small details, because I think that's really, really special that you have this insight.
Yeah. So my initial sort of step into the world of sustainability, as it were, was really just only focusing on the superficial outside of the product. So hence it was pineapple leather, for example. But then I was a bit like, but what is that? What goes on behind? So I then sort of all heels typically on the market are made from plastics, like an ABS plastic. All the stiffeners inside are typically always like thermoplastic, which are sort of using heat to form the sort of shape. And then typically things are backed with a glue. They're held together. The sole is stuck on with a glue, and that is it's a neoprene sort of glue that can be water-based, but it's still essentially it's a neoprene glue. And then you have you've got like zips and stuff, and all the other kind of components. So with this particular sort of product, I tried to see how far I could go within the current context, and instead of putting on the table everything and only and saying, well, we'll wait until the a better option comes up, I pretty much only put on the table the things that I felt we could actually work with. Yeah. So ultimately, this shoe is probably, I would say it's as far as I could go with the current constraints of manufacturing and construction that I have. So, but there are many faults within this. So, for example, this upper is an organic hemp that's been sort of printed. But where's that ink come from? It's probably come from all different sort of sources around the world. That organic hemp, yes, I bought it in Italy, but was it grown in Italy? The heel as well. Yes, it's a wooden heel. That sounds fantastic. But I've got multiple layers of different woods that probably also come from all different parts of the world. So this is really a completely it's an imperfect sort of model. And if this is really someone who cares so deeply about this, if this is really as far as I go, I really realize that I am still part of the problem and not really enough of a part of the solution. So really, what is my next sort of pivot on that? My next sort of pivot is to really look at not just what the materials are. Materials are incredibly important and contribute to a good at least 50% of the impact that a shoe has within its life cycle. But the industry needs to look at the entire process itself. Brands themselves need to be responsible for the post-consumer aspect of the shoes. Brands need to be responsible to reduce that, those probably 22 billion that end up in landfill.
I have a quick question. You say that you think that brands should be responsible for a lot of these factors. What about the responsibility from a consumer side of things? What is it that consumers can look for? I don't think it's necessarily good enough to be ignorant about it. What can we do, take responsibility if anything?
I mean, it's a multi-pronged approach. Government needs to be better at the education. Government also needs to be better at the legislation. There needs to be taxes on things that are going to be ultimately more polluting into the landfill. There needs to be better education to actually understand there's a lot of certifications that are also, essentially, I call them like members clubs. You pay to get your certification. The bar is extremely low, and it's misleading. And I think from the consumer, is it really the consumer's responsibility to do it? Yes, I think that they can make the noise saying they can demand something better, but that really, like in my own journey, I didn't demand something better in myself until I realized there was a problem and what the sort of potential scale of that problem is. So it needs to sort of also start with the designers themselves, the designers and brands, and not just even within sort of fashion. Things need to be designed for what happens to it afterwards. So whether that is something that's going to be recycled, it needs to be designed to be able to be fully recycled. It needs to, if it's going to be composted, it needs to be designed to be able to be completely composted.
Not just an afterthought of, hey, we've got a pair of shoes, can we recycle them, donate them? It's too late at that point. The whole process has to start right from the start.
Yeah, and as I said, it's going to be a multi-pronged approach. There isn't one perfect sort of route to it. Yeah, my journey is that I want to create a fully circular product that can be, that will be able to be kind of compostable, or at least recycle it back into itself with a zero with a zero fossil input within the entire making process, not just in the product itself. And then actually built within the system itself to make sure that there is a really viable take-back system or alternative, that just to make sure that either we are penalized as a company, or somehow that there's an incentive for the customer to not put it into the trash when they're finished with it.
So with our insatiable appetite for fashion, do you truly think that one day, however far away that is, we can, as a society, create a harmonious solution with nature, because I see there's a lot of, for example, on Instagram, influencers, people are being bashed for liking fashion. I mean, I don't think that's the crime here, liking fashion. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that we don't have an awful lot of choice. I think we're going to sort of hit a point where we're going to have to make some, it's going to be a gun to the head sort of situation. And the one thing I say about kind of humanity is it's extremely good at sort of self-sabotaging. But when the great minds kind of get together, humanity can make a vaccine in a year that typically takes 10 years. When really push comes to shove, we'll find a sort of solution. And there are some brilliant brains out there really working on real-life solutions to some of these sort of problems. And I think what it's going to sort of take is more awareness, and that awareness will lead to more demand. And if anything, what we know about capitalism is that it loves to supply demand. And so if the demand is there, companies will be forced to pivot, and they will be hiring the best brains in order to make that happen, because at that point, it's not only just a survival for the companies themselves, it's a survival for the human race.
Thank you, Nicholas. I really admire your tenacity, not only as a designer, but also as an individual, that you're not compromising on your values or alignments while you're building your business. And I think that's something that, quite frankly, is quite rare. So I want to applaud you and thank you for sharing that story. So in our final few moments here, what is the message or takeaway you want the audience here to remember?
I think if you can do something just in the meantime, just learn to sort of scratch the surface a little bit more. I mean, my approach to any kind of claims that any company kind of makes is assume it's bullshit and then work backwards. Let them prove to you through your own sort of work that it isn't bullshit, because there is very little legislation saying what people can say. And in the food industry, that does not happen in the same way. You cannot get away with that. And that same approach should happen towards fashion, or quite simply any other kind of manufacturing industry.
Thank you, Nicholas. I thought that was a really insightful discussion, and thank you for coming here today, because the insights you've shared is really a testament to your thought leadership and the homework and the thought processes you've had on your own. So thank you for sharing that with us today. And I hope that after listening to what Nicholas has shared, it's helped you make that next step a little bit easier, because Nicholas has gone away and done that first challenging step. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure.